All right. And then let me just let my patrons know that we're off and running because it's just for them. Just so you know, it'll be like less than 5 people watching. So it's not a big deal.
That's actually like the best because it's not too many people where you like
It,
can't keep up, you know?
right. You feel like you have to engage everybody. Yeah. And let me just let them know real quick. Um, we have like a patron chat. So I'll just let them know. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, we'll get going. Just give me like 5 seconds of silence. I'll come
Awesome.
into the intro and introduce you, and then we'll just go through our top fives. Do you have any questions or anything? Are you good?
I don't. I listened to a couple episodes today just to like
I love it. Is that a
sit.
Metallica Kill 'Em All sweater that you're wearing? What is that?
No, it's Pearl. It's like a
Oh,
Metallica
hey,
inspired Pearl, which I really
hey.
loved.
Is that a
Yes.
spoiler? I don't know.
It's not, but she's an honorable mention.
Yeah, no, she's definitely a fucking honorable mention. This bullshit. Okay. So just give me like 5 seconds. I'll come in and we'll get going.
Cool.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Two Peas on a Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. It means a lot to me. This is Gerald here with you, of course, your host, and I got to bring in a guest host every week. Another pea on the pod, if you will. And another first time guest this week that I'm so excited about. We've been chatting for a few months now about making this happen, and here we are. So 2023 is new guest, new year. We're doing it. And another one this week, like I said, Kenzie from Oscar Central is on the piece for the first time. Kenzie, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here, especially like this time of year. It's thrilling that I was considered for this.
No, I mean, who else could I have though? Really, let's be honest. You're doing Oscar Central over there. We're right in the heart of award season. The BAFTAs just happened yesterday. By the way, shout out to Austin Butler. Am I right? How good was that?
I think that was one of the first times my daughter, who is a little over a year, has seen me scream. So that
Yeah,
was
I loved
thrilling.
it.
I was to say I was over the moon is like an understatement.
I absolutely loved it. If I'm the member of any armies this season, it's Babylon and Austin Butler. I'm ready.
I'm in both of those. So
Yeah,
this is
you are.
great. This is
We've
great.
been crossing paths. No, yeah, for sure. But yeah, Kenzie's here from Oscar Central, and like I said, this episode's airing. We're recording it in February, but it's airing a week before the broadcast of the Academy Awards. So, Kenzie, tell them real quick, what is the top five tonight? What are we counting down?
We are doing something that is very near and dear to my heart. It jumped out at me from your list. We are doing
Hmm.
top 5 Oscar snubs.
We are, and man, well. Let's just give a couple asterisks to the listeners up top. So, we decided to kind of curate our list if the person or movie or whatever we end up naming it didn't get nominated at all for the Academy Awards, right? So
Correct. Good.
when you Google it and when you kind of like think about it in your head, like some will come to mind from several years ago, and I'll be like, I can't believe that didn't, that got snubbed. But it turns out maybe it did get nominated, it just didn't win. But we just went straight up. They didn't even get recognized in terms of a nomination. And I'm right saying that, right, Kenzie? You went that way as well.
Yes. And I think that is a better way to go with snubs because
Hmm.
that's what I think of first when I think of snubs is like they didn't even bother. There was no chance for them to
Yeah.
win an Oscar. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
love those parameters.
I agree because it's like that old thing where it's like it's just an honor to be nominated,
Yeah.
and that I feel like that's true to a certain extent. Like, we were just talking about Austin Butler. I mean, he's a young dude. He hasn't done a lot, but just use him as an example. Like, he's nominated at all these different award shows, including the Oscars. So, like, if Brendan Fraser wins it or like Colin Farrell, like he's not going to be like he's truly going to be like, oh, it was such an honor to be a part of the five that got mentioned. Whereas you have somebody like Mia Goth, who is on your shirt tonight, not even mentioned, and you're just like mind blown based on the performance. So I think that you're right. I think is like a more like it's like extra snub.
It's like the deepest cut you could possibly get in this game, at least.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been talking about this for a while. You and I got together. We've been friends on social media. We got together because of our mutual adoration for Nicole Ackman. We love her. So I know
She's
she's part of
the best.
literally the best.
I am meeting her for the first time in real life this week, and
Oh my
I
God, I
am
didn't know that.
yeah. And so, like, starting off the week with someone who lives near her, and then she'll be here at the end of the week is pretty funny.
Wow, I didn't know that. And I was just telling you, I think I might be meeting her as
Yeah.
well.
So big week for Nicole Ackman stands. Big
Wow,
week.
it's like the Nicole Ackman stands are coming out this week. That's great. But anyway, so we've been talking about this a little bit. So when you were doing your research, Kenzie, and I know you're deep into the Oscars and you do Oscar Central, you guys had more categories than the actual Oscars do when you did your awards a couple weeks ago, which was great, by the way.
I'm pretty sure we had 36
Yeah,
categories,
it was a lot.
and it was a lot.
But it was great. I loved it. I listened to the whole thing, and it was awesome. And I loved hearing you guys kind of pine over a lot of that stuff. And I was joking with you that I love that "Don't Worry, Darling" got so much love during that.
The thing is, I think
great.
that something people forget is like you don't have to like a movie to admire the technical aspects of it. And I think "Don't Worry, Darling's" a great example of that because all the pieces are there. It's just the script. And my good friend Emma Sasek from Next Best Picture, like she lives in Palm Springs and showed so many pictures of like the neighborhood they shot in, and I was just like, this production design and cinematography, it's over the edge. I don't know how you shut it out. Yeah. So we had to do something.
I'm not a hater of that film. I mean, I know it's not the greatest thing in the world, but like I liked my time with it.
If
like
people
I enjoyed it.
If people are allowed to enjoy Ant-Man, I'm allowed to enjoy Don't Worry, Darling. I think is the moral of the story.
That's fair, sure. But I wanted to ask you, Kenzie, when you were doing your research for this top 5, without giving any of your picks away, how was that for you? Was it like pretty easy to develop that list, or was it kind of hard research for you?
Yes and no, because my parents were really into the Oscars, so I actually have been watching them my entire life. And there are some that like I knew were going to be on my list right away. And then from there, I gave myself my own parameters of my top 5 will strictly be people or nominations that were actually in contention for a nomination, not things I was hope dicting that I wanted to get a nomination. So I tried my best to do people who only got precursors and then were just snubbed at the last minute, and not do people who were like Mia Goth, where I was just like, please get in. Because if I did please get in, we would be here for 10 years.
And it would be.
I'm a horror girly, so
me too. Guy, but yeah.
The list goes on and on for us horror fans of performances, editing, sound that didn't get in. So it's
makeup and costume. I mean, every year there should be a horror film in that for makeup. I mean, it's crazy.
So it was quite a journey for me to cut it down, but I did do it. But
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
It was equally tough for me. I kind of followed the same mindset as you did, where it was like, if they were in the discussion that particular year, they were eligible for my list. Whereas if it was just kind of like a wishful thinking, not necessarily. But at the same time, you were mentioning horror, and I'll use that as an example without giving any of my picks away. But when it comes to that, like kind of umbrella, where it's just like a whole like population of people or text or whatever is being ignored, then I kind of picked one to represent that. And you'll see what I mean, because there's 2 in my top 5 that are kind of like a group of people as opposed to like one specific nomination. But it's just crazy to me with the horror thing, and that people are always like, because I'm a huge Oscars guy, as you know, but I'm an even bigger horror guy. So people are just like, I can't believe you like the Oscars. They never do anything for horror. And I'm like, I know. It's like,
you kind of like learn to just go with it. Like you're like, it doesn't even hurt me anymore. It's gone on so long that like it would just be expected. A treat if something happened for us.
I agree. So we'll see where we go. I mean, I've been following you on Twitter and stuff, and a lot of the people that you're close to, I think we have similar sensibilities, which is another reason I was excited to get you on the broadcast finally. But I don't know. You said at the top, I can't remember if it was before we started recording, but you said you didn't think we would have any crossover because you got kind of
I
cute with.
tried my best. We might have. There's 2 I'm thinking you might consider, but there's 3 I'm pretty sure I shall be alone on. We'll see though.
Well,
I could say that, and then you could be like, "Wow, we're 5 for 5." Like,
I know. I mean, you never know. Let's find out. I'm going to let you get us started. Kenzie Vanunu from Oscars Central. What's your number 5 Oscar snub?
Okay, my number 5 is one of my more recent ones, but it is one that is a horror nomination that we were kind of just touching on. Suspiria for hair and makeup, because the following year they expanded the category from 3 to 5. So you could say that is the Suspiria rule. That because I heard from people who attended the Bake Off, because it was shortlisted, that it had one of the best presentations, the best footage. They made, spoiler alert, Tilda Swinton 3 characters. And some people didn't even know that she was 3 characters. And that was all due to the amazing hair and makeup work in that film. And that movie has some of the strongest gory scenes I have seen in a modern film in so long. And that is mostly, some of it's due to visual effects, but for the most part, that is the hair and makeup team. And the amount of prosthetics in that film, I just truly was blown away. And a lot of my friends in LA like work on prosthetic teams, and we're just like, that is some of the best work I've ever seen. And to just go unchecked was heartbreaking. I think about it a lot.
It's crazy. I got something to tell you. I just saw this, the one you're referring to, for the very first time like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I just watched it. It was a blind spot for me, and I was like, I actually had an episode with another guest, and I was doing blind spots, like my top 5 blind spots. And I was like, I've never seen Suspiria. I love Dakota Johnson. I love so many things that have to do with that movie, and so I finally saw it. I loved it. I agree with you that the aesthetic and the makeup and stuff is just like phenomenal. And I can remember it being part of the discussion that year too.
Yeah, it was very much like everyone I know thinks it was number 4. So if it had been the following year, it would have easily been in because you would have had 5 spots. So crazy. It's just really insulting because the hair and makeup category was added to the Oscars because of horror movies. And for it to just like essentially now be the fat suit category is very upsetting.
Yeah, and this would be an exercise, and maybe somebody's done it, I don't know, but you could go back the last 30 years at least, and you could start with every year, like 1985 up until today, and every year you could probably find a movie in the horror genre that could easily be in the top 5 makeup.
Exactly.
I mean, especially like the practical stuff, and
that's the thing. It's like it's such practical work, and there's so much to it because it's like regular hair and makeup on everyday people, and then there's like blood or monsters, and it's just like the work is never ending. And to see that, specifically that genre of film be shut out from this category is so upsetting. And just knowing if it had been 1 year later, it would have been nominated it's tough.
It's tough. My daughter's 21. She's a film editor. She's in film school, and she keeps saying that she's going to get to Hollywood, post college, and she's going to get to the academy. She's going to make a difference.
She will.
We need to get more young people there.
Yes. Like you can see like the just within the voting body. So imagine like people out here working there. It's just like it makes a difference. So
it is heartbreaking, though. You're right. I mean, I feel so bad for so many people that make those types of movies come to life. I mean, without that makeup work, a lot of those
you wouldn't believe it if it was like if it's bad makeup work, it immediately falls to like a B movie category, and it's like it's just the work is astounding, and it's astounding it doesn't get in.
Well, I think it's a great pick, and I think it's so funny that you picked one that I literally just saw a few weeks ago, and I loved it, and I agree. I echo your sentiment. I think it's
I'm glad you saw it before I said that, because then you would have been like, "Who?"
I know. I was thinking that. But as a horror guy, people are like, "You haven't seen that?" I'm like, "No, I haven't," but I corrected it a few weeks ago.
It was pretty divided when it came out because people are so protective of the original, which like I was too, but I trust Lica Guadagnino with my life. So I was never going to not be interested, but I feel like
Well,
people have grown on it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think so too. And I do remember kind of the divisiveness initially, but yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was great. I thought it was great. So I think it's a good pick to get us started. So my number 5, you started with tech for yours. Mine's not necessarily technical stuff, but it's behind the camera, and it's going to be Bradley Cooper's direction of A Star Is Born. Is my number 5. This was my favorite movie of 2018. It was my favorite movie that year. It was my number 1. I love so many things about it, from the performances to the music. I mean, Shallow is a freaking banger for the all times of anything you want to name, any song from any movie. But what Cooper did as a director here, an actor slash director, and the way it was shot in such a like personal way, like it was such a personal portrait that he was painting, I felt like. And he took this, we're talking about remakes with Suspiria, but he took this kind of like remake and kind of modernized it a little bit. But, I saw different behind the scenes stuff where he filmed the concert footage like at, I think it was Coachella or South by
He
Southwest or
filmed
something like that.
at Stagecoach, and he also filmed at Glastonbury. And
Yeah.
Glastonbury is really cool because he filmed right before Chris Christopherson went on set.
Okay.
In between
Nice.
his sets. And that is so incredible that he was filming a remake of a Chris Christopherson movie, playing the
awesome.
Chris Christopherson part. It was like, let me interrupt your set.
So meta. Yeah.
But he played in front of real audiences.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So he really embraced like the kind of, because the film feels real. Like it feels like a real, like fly on the wall situation as an audience member. And I think that a lot of that has to do with his direction. Of course, the performances as well. I mean, Lady Gaga was amazing in this, as was he. He did get nominated for acting, but not for directing. And I just remember, because you were talking about precursors and stuff, he was in the conversation the whole year. He was getting nominated for other stuff. And I felt like it was a big snub when he didn't get nominated. I don't think he would have won that year. And I wasn't necessarily even expecting that. But I definitely expected a nomination. Like I said, it was tough for me too, because it was my favorite movie that year. So that's my number 5, Bradley Cooper for director for A Star Is Born. So you're a fan of this too, I guess you.
This was like my whole, like A Star Is Born and then Suspiria in 2018 were like my entire personality. I have maybe 500 memes about A Star Is Born on my phone. I think it is one of the strongest directorial debuts of the last 20 years.
Easily.
My mom is a really big Barbra Streisand fan and a Judy Garland fan, so both of their versions of A Star Is Born were classics in my household.
Sure.
So when this came out, I was like, it's Lady Gaga, because I originally was on Pop Girl Twitter, so that was like the merging of my two like interests. And but I was not a fan of Bradley Cooper. I was not interested in The Hangover. I was not interested in American Sniper, any of that. But now I would lay down my life for that man. I don't know what he did with A Star Is Born, but like, my God, it's so personal. Like you were saying, like everyone's like, Lydia Tarr, is she real? Was Jackson Maine real? What did this man do? I was completely blown away. The way he shot all the performances is also so interesting, because now you see it a lot with the camera behind them on stage. And I think that like he really brought that back, because that's a very classic way to shoot performances. But it kind of went away because people were so focused on making us an audience member, whereas he wanted us to feel connected to the performer and how the performer felt. And I think that there are so many maneuvers in that film where it's just like such exquisite filmmaking that I just feel like we don't really get anymore from like mid-budget adult dramas. And then that final scene where she is singing and it cuts to him is one of the worst and best things that's ever happened to me. I remember I took my entire team from my day job to go see this movie a week early. And I was like, you guys are going to love it. And they were all like, I'm going to sue you for emotional distress. I just think it was such an incredible directorial debut. And the way he was double nominated at DGA and lost is,
I know. Well, it's one
wild.
of those things too, where it's like, it's almost like unfathomable that it was his first direction. It was just like you watch it and you go, I mean, I think of Charlotte Wells this year too for After Sun. And I'm just like, this is the first movie you've
It's
directed.
really crazy to
Like, what am I
have
doing with my life?
confidence behind the camera. And
Yeah.
obviously Bradley Cooper's been on so many movie sets, he really learned from that. But like I in my head, I assume he'll get snubs again next year for Maestro. I feel like they won't give him a director nomination once again. But they're looking at next year, he could be a 12-time Oscar loser, 13-time even.
Oh God. God bless
So
him.
they need
Well, he
to
did it.
they need to figure something out with this man. He's gonna
He
end
did.
up Diane Warren with an honorary and like 27 nominations.
Yeah.
Like,
He did that T-Mobile ad, which I'm glad
his
we have that.
mom, okay, so I wasn't watching the Super Bowl and like 30 people texted me like his mom
Yeah.
roasted him about being an
Oh,
Oscar
it's
loser.
hilarious.
Like,
It was hilarious.
and
But
then he
yeah.
lost. His team lost at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Poor
Oh yeah.
guy.
That's right.
Poor
I didn't even
guy.
think about that. Yeah.
He can't win anything. He literally can't. You know what? But he does have a Grammy from A Star Is Born.
That's
He'll
right.
never have an Oscar, but he has a Grammy.
Oh man, I hope you're wrong, but yeah, it's
But
a
that's
tough
real.
haul.
That was my number 6, just because.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, he almost made it in, but I was trying to. I didn't want everyone to know all 5 of mine. If that makes sense.
I got you. Well, there you go. That's my number 5. So you had this hair and makeup team from Suspiria at your number 5. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is one that I feel like a lot of people will probably have if you ask them to make this list. But it's one of the first ones I remember being really invested in because it was my first Oscar season living in LA. It is Andrew Garfield in supporting actor for The Social Network.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. He is that movie to me. Like, he has so many incredible line deliveries, and not even just his line deliveries. Obviously, his "fuck you flip flops" is one of the greatest things that's ever happened. But he just like has this way he moves his body differently throughout the movie as he becomes more sure of himself, more scared of himself, more scared of the situation they're in. And I also think that that movie obviously revolves so much around Jesse's performance, but Andrew is like our connection, kind of. Like, he's kind of the audience surrogate in a way, because we'll never be Mark Zuckerberg, but like we can all relate to the person who is alongside someone and gets
he's relatable.
Over.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think he does such a good job of like being someone who belongs at Harvard, but being relatable, which is like obviously really easy to do if someone is playing Mark Zuckerberg and the opposite of relatable. But I just think I don't know, that was very much like he is a movie star, and I want to see him in everything he does after that. Like, and he got Golden Globe nominations. He got a BAFTA nomination. Like, he did miss SAG, which should have been a sign of what was to come. Yeah. But at the time, that movie felt like it was gunning to win picture and director. So to not have supporting actor along for the ride was just a travesty. And the way The Social Network ended up being repaid at the Oscars, we should have known. Of course, he didn't get in. But it was just I just don't like his Oscar nomination for Hacksaw Ridge. But this could have been like a career defining Oscar nomination. He might be better off that he didn't get it, but I think it's just, of modern movie performances that have been snubbed that are not horror girls, that is one that cuts pretty deep.
It's coming up on my list too. I'll just tell you, we have a little more crossover there. So
I love that.
I'll talk a lot about it when it comes up on my list, but I think at least in like recent memory, this is like the biggest, like, what the fuck were you guys watching that you didn't put his name on this paper? Like, I can't believe. I mean, regardless of winning or whatever, I think he should have won it that year. But regardless,
I do too.
It's not even nominated. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
it's really crazy. It's one of those things.
I mean, it's insane.
My husband's very out of tune of all this stuff. Like, he overhears me. He gets tired of me talking to him about it. But we rewatch The Social Network like once every few years, and he even is like, really? Like, this, you didn't do this? Like, and you know, maybe it was too much for them or something. I don't know. But I feel like he checks all the boxes that we think they want to see in a performance. He yells, he cries, he gets emotional, he's calm. He has so many clips. It's too much to bear, honestly. Yeah. I can't wait to hear all your thoughts on this.
I agree with you, though. But Andrew Garfield from The Social Network's your number 4. My number 4 is kind of a representation of the entire women of horror snub fest that we've been getting for the last 30 plus years. And I could have picked a couple here. I have one in my honorables that literally could be in this spot too. But who I decided to pick was Lupita Nyong'o from Jordan Peele's Us. So that would be my number 4. I mean, she's playing essentially 2 different characters. One villainous, like scary, just monster, basically. And then one really kind of like quiet mother figure. And she's I think one of the greatest actresses of the last 10 years or so. And she absolutely just slayed this role. I mean, it was just so good. Like, you would see her in one frame as, one character, and then you would see her in the other frame as the tethered character. And like, you wouldn't compute. I mean, we would, because, we're into the season or whatever, but it would be hard for like a GA member to compute. Like, that's the same person. Like, they're just so different. And she just like was so perfect in both roles throughout the movie. And I just feel like, a woman of color also, which would have been great. Jordan Peele has had a little bit of Academy pedigree with Get Out coming into this. So it's one of those kind of like, you cross your fingers and you pray at night and like, maybe it'll happen. And, if it happens, everybody's flabbergasted. So I understand that. But I again, she's kind of the representation for me of kind of what we've been talking about the whole episode, where it's just like, women of horror or just horror movies in general just don't get any representation from the Academy. And I feel like she's a perfect example for us. And I feel like that, in other words, had that been nominated, I don't think anybody that saw that performance would go, well, that was dumb. Why did you nominate her? They would all be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, she fucking
Even
killed
if
that.
you
What I mean?
don't like horror movies, which is so funny. I have been a horror person. My parents showed me The Exorcist when I was 6 years old, and it just like changed my life forever.
Wow.
And my husband, I cannot talk about a horror movie. He's like, absolutely not.
Oh,
but
wow.
Us, he was interested in because he heard it wasn't like scary. So we did watch it together. But we watched it after the Oscars that year, and he was like, how could you not do that? Like, so it's like one of those things that like anyone who sees it or even just sees a clip of her playing both parts is so confused she didn't get in. And she did get SAG, and she had the like, and obviously critic wins do not channel to anything, but she had the most critic wins of any performer that year in any acting race. And it's just, she's a former winner. Like it, and then like you were saying, Jordan Peele had just won an Oscar. Like, I understand we don't nominate horror movies, but it's like, you don't nominate horror movies that are like written and directed by former winners and like starring a former winner.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. Like you're saying, like women of color in horror is such a like really like, we always talk about horror being shut out in general, but like women of color in horror never even mentioned when people make like best of lists. And Lupita really changed that with her performance, because people were like, you cannot ignore this. And I really thought like her snub was going to be like this wake up call of like, we have to include horror movies. Obviously it didn't happen, but I do always list, like, Nicole is not a horror person. And that was a movie I put on a list of horror movies to recommend for her, because one, she's interested in the Oscars, obviously. Like, we run Oscar Central together. And I always talk about, like, that's one that really hurts me the most. Like, it's a beautiful set of performances because, like you're saying, she plays 2 roles. It's the physicality to her performance. The first scene of the other set of her in the house where she's like crawled up on the chair is terrifying. And it's so funny when you see her in real life. She's the sweetest kind. I didn't even know she could do something like that. And it just
and
shows,
then you'll cut
like,
back to her,
crying,
like,
reacting, the Jordan Peele cry. It's one of the most, like, of any recent horror film, like, that's a performance that will like stand the test of time. And like, I'm not even that big a fan of that movie in particular. Like, I don't really think it works for me as well as it does for other people, but you cannot deny her like every performance in that movie, but hers specifically. And she really sells the ending, because I think that's the other thing is like, that movie doesn't work at all without a performance of that caliber at the center. And
I
I
agree.
think that like that's what the Oscars are for. We were talking about this with Don't Worry Darling. Like you cannot like a movie but still like aspects of it. And this is the perfect example of like you cannot like horror but you cannot deny this performance.
I know, and
That's such a good one. That was actually my number 7. So
I'm giving all your honorables for my
I
top
know,
5.
just crossing them off. But that's
Yeah,
such a
no,
good one. And that's the
it's just,
perfect thing for what you were saying, that you were like trying to honor the horror genre.
that, and actors of color too. I mean,
Yeah, especially this week. That's such an
women. I
important.
mean, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. So that would be my number 4, and I'll mention the other one that I think was just a brain dead snub in the horror genre too when we get to my honorable mentions. But I decided to go with Lupita. So what's up for you at your number 3, Kenzie? What do you got?
So my number 3 is actually something that my parents always yelled about that has really stayed with me. Would be Do the Right Thing for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the most, like, if you had to make a time capsule of movies, that would definitely be in it. I think it is a movie that has defined movie watching, movie making, acting, writing, everything. And I always think of Best Picture as something that combines every category that's at the Oscars to make the Best Picture. And I don't think there's a movie that does that better than Do the Right Thing. It's a movie that I think becomes more relevant every year. And it's so crazy that it just wasn't even nominated. And then when you look at what won Best Picture that year, it is...
What was it? Remind me. I was trying to look it up real quick. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironic, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty brutal. But I think that honestly, like, is something that'll like over time just like push up the Do the Right Thing legacy. Is like it didn't even get nominated for a picture, and look at what won. Like that's where we were at as a country and as a movie watching community. Like that's what was popular. And I think that like just shows how important a movie like Do the Right Thing is. And it's so crazy. At the Academy Museum, they had a Spike Lee exhibit, and obviously like 85% of it was Do the Right Thing. And I'm like, it's really weird. This is in the Academy Museum.
Yeah, where were you guys in '89 or whatever?
It's so crazy.
I mean, it also shows too. I mean, I know it's a time capsule a little bit because we're, in fairness, we're talking about 30 plus years ago, but it also kind of shows too the detachment of the Academy from like the normal population, quote unquote, which is always kind of a thing where it's always like, even us that are like really into the Oscar season and make predictions and do all that stuff, even we kind of scratch our heads sometimes, like, when Green Book won, for example, or like there's just always kind of this like ever existing detachment from what is an Oscar movie versus what people are going, oh, this is a no-brainer. Like, I mean, I'm just going to tell you right now, like, if Everything Everywhere doesn't win Best Picture this year, there's a detachment from like what the like zeitgeist conversation is among the mass population versus like the Academy members. And it might not win, and that's okay. There's other great pictures and up for it or whatever. But I just feel like that's a movie, as an example, that's like so like locked in to the general population, and then the Academy may or may not pick it. That's just an example, but
yeah,
I feel like Do the Right Thing was one of those years too.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of like the pendulum always really swings back and forth between like they do something that appears populist mostly to older people like Green Book, and then there's movies that win that say something and are representative of where we are as a country, like Moonlight. And it's just like really crazy to see how far back that goes, where there's like big swings of like what wins and what wins the following year. And it's just like, it's one of those things. I'm glad Do the Right Thing maybe didn't win, because people will always talk about it now as like people discover it as they grow up and they're like, wow, this movie didn't win. Like, that's crazy. But there's always like that backlash to movies that win. But I do think it would have aged like Moonlight in a way where it would have been like, and Parasite, where it would have just been like one of the best winners that represented what people wanted and what actually won. but it's one that really like stings me a lot. And my parents just talked about it all the time when I was growing up. And when I was old enough to like really watch it and understand it, because that's another thing is like I watched it when I was young and it didn't really like click for me what it was saying. And once I got older and really watched it, it was just like, it's so insane. And then as like the years have gone by, it's like really crazy just seeing how it just remains like such an important piece of cinema with everything that's going on in our country. And then when Black Klansman came out and lost a Green Book, it was.
I know. It's like you're doing this again. Like
at least he won his screenplay. At least he won his screenplay. But absolutely, just it's. I think it's like gonna always be one of the biggest snubs to me, even if like it could have been in so many other places because it did get 2 nominations, but not picture. And obviously, in a year of 10, it would have been in. But in a year of 5, it didn't make the cut, for sure, which cuts me.
Well, it's a good pick, and I agree with you. It's definitely a baffling thing, which I guess all these are that we're talking about. But that's your number 3, Do the Right Thing. So my number 3 is another acting one. Actually, I think it's the first one I had Lupita before this, but so it's going to be Jake Gyllenhaal from Nightcrawler. All right. This guy has put in a body of work that's pretty fucking good. Like you could name a lot of his roles that weren't necessarily in the quote unquote award season discussion that were award worthy, in my opinion. But when you have a performance like his in Nightcrawler, it was at the time, at least, such a like eye-opening performance from him where if you had known his work prior to that, you know, there, like I said, there was other stuff that was award worthy, but there was nothing like this where it was like, this guy's fucking committed to doing something completely different from anything he's done in his career. And he's giving it 1,000%. And it was just, it was scary. It was funny. It was somewhat sad at times. Like it was this really kind of creepy, voyeuristic, like image of this guy that he was painting. And it was so memorable. Like in my opinion, I mean, he's done some great stuff, but in my opinion, this is his best performance. I thought it was just a shame that he didn't get mentioned for this one. So I love it.
This is in my honorable mentions, but this was one that really got to me. Like, what else does this man have to do? Like,
right.
I'm a bit, so Jake and Bradley have a quote unquote feud that's never been verbalized. I just imagine it because of their Bernstein fight. But this one is just the man lost all that weight. Not that you have to do that, but like he did all these things physically, went to the hospital when punching the mirror in this movie. And it's really crazy that he got absolutely everything: Golden Globe, BAFTA, SAG. That was quite a shock that morning. It only got screenplay, which it should have been in cinematography. And it did get all of these at BAFTA. Like it got supporting actress, it got everything. And it's just really wild that such an American Los Angeles movie could be paid so little. But I mean, that movie lives and dies on his performance. And it's one of those things where he is terrifying, but you cannot look away from him. Specifically, that scene where he comes back to the news organization when he's more confident and he's like yelling at her, but like, and he's trying to like tower over her, but he's obviously like 50 pounds and cannot do that. It is just so scary. And it's very much like very similar to like horror movie performances, but it's obviously not a horror movie. And there's something about his eyes in the movie that will just stay with me for the rest of my life. And I think that movie really like cemented him as like, oh, like he can do this. And then he didn't get nominated. And I don't want to be mean to him, but his career has just taken quite a turn that is not for me. It is not for me. And I think that all stems from this, honestly. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but like missing a nomination here, I feel like it did something because Ambulance.
Well, I mean, to your point, though,
Roadhouse remake. Like, what is going on?
I know, what the hell is that? But to your point, though, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, he gave 1,000%. He gave literally everything he could to this role, and I'm not saying he did it to be nominated, but I'm just saying
But
that
you
in
would
his
like to
mind,
at the end of all that.
yeah.
Like,
But
it
I'm
would be
just saying in
nice.
his mind, he's probably like kind of like what you said, like what else can I do for a performance? Like I don't know that I could give anything else to a
Yeah.
character. Um it's just so it just sucks. So I wonder if it was too dark for the Academy because we've been talking about horror tonight. I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a
it's really
very dark.
similar that it could just be too
Yeah.
much because we do see that a lot with like especially lead actor where they kind of don't go for the darker performances or the more like they tend to do that more with like female performances, but it's
Mhm.
just like it's so brutal that he missed out. It's like
I
the
mean,
guy did
this is his
everything.
performance, man. I mean, this is his. I'm not. I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, he's got a long way to go. He's a young dude for all intents and purposes. So I mean, who knows? I mean,
I
I
hope
hope
he comes
he.
back with
Me too.
something
I hope he's in the
that's
conversation again.
yeah, I can't do Spider-Man. I can't do ambulance. I can't do it, Jake. I need you back. I need you back in an
Oh
Ang Lee
man,
movie. I need you something.
yeah.
Like I can't
I
do
need
this.
you back. I need you back chasing the gold, man. Let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
Oh,
he's a great actor nonetheless, and I feel like this was his best performance. That, like you said, was getting nominated at other places. It just was. I remember being like, oh, "Holy shit, they didn't nominate him." I remember that being one of the ones that I was just like, based on the precursors at least, that I was just flabbergasted. So there you go. We're up to our runner ups. Kenzie, you're up first. What do you have at number 2?
okay. My number 2 has recently, well, kind of been in the headlines again.
Mhm.
So Lana Del Rey's Young and Beautiful for The Great Gatsby did
Mhm.
not get a nomination, even though many, myself included, consider it one of the best original songs ever written for a film. But the reason it's been back in the conversation is because Bruce Brotner was nominated for a film. He emailed every member of the Academy to vote for him. So they
Mm.
rescinded his nomination. And with everything that went on with Andrea Riseborough, people brought this up because it's the most recent nomination to be rescinded.
Mhm.
But in addition to that, before the nominations, during the week of Oscar voting for nominations, an email was mailed, or like a envelope was mailed to multiple members of the music branch saying that her song was ineligible for some technicality with the release date of the
Mm.
film. And
Mm.
people bought it, and the Academy investigated it, and it was found to be fake. Like it was never ineligible. But she didn't get
Wow.
nominated. And a lot of people wonder if that specifically was why, because she had been nominated, the song had been nominated absolutely everywhere before.
I remember.
It
Yep.
was one of the best performing songs of the year, like commercially. And like everybody knew what movie it was from. And that never happens with original
Right.
songs. Like you obviously this year that we're in right now is very different because we have people like Lady Gaga and Rihanna nominated. But like normally it's not like that. And
Right.
this
Right.
year they got Lana Del Rey, who at the time was one of like the most famous singers in the game. And it's like
Mhm.
the ratings you could have gotten off Lana Del Rey. But
I
it's just
know.
funny that at the end of the day, that category ended up only having 4 nominations because they rescinded the one, and she was just right there. She could have won.
Oh
It's
my god.
it's really
Yeah,
crazy. And with Boz
I
Lerman
remember.
in the conversation again, I'm just remembering them being everywhere together, and that music
Ugh.
video was beautiful. And it was just like really. I'm not a fan of the original song category. I would probably get rid of it if I was in charge of the Academy, but that song is used in the movie. It's recognizable outside of the movie. It like hits all the boxes you want an original song to hit.
Mhm.
Kind of like Shallow was like used in the movie, part of the plot,
Right.
but like
Very similar, I was gonna say,
there
actually, yeah.
was no mistaking that Young and Beautiful was about the Great Gatsby story when you looked at the
Right.
lyrics. And like it's just like it actually did what it needed to for an original song, and just it getting shut out was absolutely wild. But that was like a really exciting like Oscar year with everything that was going on behind the scenes. So
Mhm.
I'm thankful for the drama, but I'm sad it missed out on the nomination.
Yeah.
And it'll every time the song comes on my phone, I'm just like, God, what could have been? What could have
Gosh.
been?
Well, what's tough too, and Young and Beautiful's one, Shallow's one. I mean, you count them on one hand, probably. I'm not even kidding. But when a song becomes like a character in the movie, like it's so like attached to the production that it was written for. I mean, how can it not, at a minimum, be nominated?
It's a crime.
Yeah, the controversy probably had something to do with it, but yeah, that sucks. And Elena Del Rey is a icon walking. I love her. So
I love her. We could have avoided her dating a cop if they had just nominated this song for an Oscar. Like, I don't know what to tell them. Like, they could have helped us.
Saved so much. So look, much like I did with my number 4 with La Pizza representing women in horror, I don't really even know which one to pick, but basically I'm going to name women directors as my runner-up, and I'm going to pick Greta Gerwig for Little Women most recently, because it's probably the one that's top of mind. Although you could even name some from this year as well. But I have this thing on my phone, Kenzie, that I found today that like literally is why I put it on my list, because I literally couldn't believe it. Let me find it. So it says there have been over 90 years of the Academy Awards. And in that time, there have been 5 women, okay, in 94 years when this was written, for Best Director. Catherine Bigelow is the only one that has won it for The Hurt Locker, which I agreed with for that year, by the way. There's so many. It's got a few that were like huge misses here, of which Greta Gerwig was one for Little Women. You mentioned Barbara Streisand earlier for Prince of Tides is another one. Rhonda Haines for Children of a Lesser God. There's been a lot. Little Miss Sunshine, Valerie Faris. There's been a lot that the film gets nominated, and it gets a lot of technical nominations, acting nominations, and then you have this director column, and the director's missing. And it's like, help me out here. Like, how is, 4, 5, 6 categories of the film and acting in the film and the film itself for Best Picture, but the person in the chair that created what is being nominated in all these subcategories is not being nominated. So whether it's intentional or not, it's a problem. And and I'm a dude. I mean, obviously you're a woman, so maybe you have something you want to say about it. But as a dude, I'm going, what? like this year alone, before you go, let me just say something. One of the things that fucking got me this year on Twitter, of all places. So we get the nominations this year, like whatever. And somebody tweeted out an image, and they were like, here's a snapshot of the Best Director nominees. And it was a sign from Five Guys, burgers and fries.
It's really funny because this year's actually 6 men.
Oh, God.
They couldn't even just be like, it's 5 men. They were like, let's do 6. It is, especially in a year like this, where I feel like there were so many options. It wasn't like previous years where there's only like one woman in contention. And I understand that like every year we have plenty of movies directed by women, but like there were plenty of movies that received Oscar nominations that were directed by women, and movies that like The Woman King should have been Oscar nominated that were not at all. And
Sarah Polley should be nominated for Best Director.
Sarah Polley should be right there.
Absolutely zero question that she should be nominated.
It's like, and I understand their whole thing is like they kind of have their international slot, they have their woman's slot, and they're like, we can't do both. But it's just the Greta Gerwig one sends me to space. That was one of my honorable mentions because the movie had 6 Oscar nominations, and they were like, never mind. It directed itself.
I mean, I can remember talking to my wife about that particular one that year. I mean, I know she got nominated for Lady Bird, which I actually liked Lady Bird a little bit more in terms of, against each other.
I will die for both of those movies. I will die for Barbie, I assume. I'm sure I will too. It's going to blow us all away. I just think that, like, if Greta Gerwig can't get in, like, what is this saying about women of color? And, like, Ava DuVernay is one of my honorable mentions because Selma, Best Picture nominee, one original song, directed itself. Like, it should have been an actor also. But there's something to say that, like, white women can't get nominated. So, like, what are we saying about women of color? Specifically Black women, because time and time again, there are so many Black women that direct movies that land with audiences. Like, you look at The Woman King, A+ cinema score. It made double its budget. It was the #1 movie opening weekend. It came out. it held on for weeks. I saw that movie in theaters with my mom when she came to visit me like 4 months after it came out, like because it was still playing. And it comes out on Netflix. It's the #1 movie in the world on Netflix. Like that movie worked with people that were at home in theaters. That movie made money. That movie was a technical feat. It had Viola Davis, Academy Award winner.
Exactly.
Viola Davis at its center. And that movie did everything it needed to. And like, it wasn't enough. And it's like, there's a serious conversation to be had about women getting into director, but there's a more serious conversation about like women of color getting in. And it's like over the weekend, Getty Images puts out a photo of the Daniels with Academy Award winner Chloe Zhao, and they label her Stephanie Hsu. Like it's
oh God, I didn't see that.
And it was up for 12 hours. It's there's such an awful conversation that needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon because it's just getting worse every year. This list shouldn't get longer, it should get shorter. And obviously,
another thing that's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's just very frustrating. And
no,
it's
I agree.
like there are so many years where I can give you like 7 women directors I wanted in, but it had no chance because like I think a lot of people need to take a step back and realize like there are like you can't just get into director. Like look at Edward Berger, a white man, won director at BAFTA over the weekend, but isn't even nominated because like they don't know who he is, so they just didn't nominate him. So it's an even bigger hurdle for women because women don't get the same opportunities as men still, specifically still women of color. It's harder. And it's just like, for me, like Gina from the woman that directed The Woman King, like she is a name. Like people know her. Like her movies have been working for people for decades. And it's like, just, it's so frustrating. And but it's just like even more frustrating with a year like this, where you look at Charlotte Wells, won every single debut director award she could have won and was never even considered for director. It's like, what, like, and we had Sarah Polley. We had
Sarah Polley. Yeah.
Like, there are so many, and it's just like, I don't even know. And it's you look at the debut director lineup from DGA, 4 or 5 are women. And it's like, what are you saying to them that they can't get into director? And it's like Sarah Polley should have been in, but there are so many other women that should have been in. And it's like just so frustrating. In a year of riches with women directors, they didn't even give us one.
Well, can I ask you? I agree. Well, can I ask you too, as a woman, I'll just ask you. So, I mean, this has obviously been a problem because I just gave you that stat where it was like, 5 over 90 plus years or whatever. So like, as that's happening year after year, and it happened again this year, as we've been talking about with Sarah Polley and Charlotte Wells and others that missed, is it like kind of like a wave that's growing that eventually, because what really frustrates me too is that what the Academy apparently doesn't realize is that 1 or 2 of these nominations of these women, let's say they nominate women like at least one every year for the next like 5 years. Let's just say that happens. That's going to be such a celebrated thing. They're going to seem like heroes. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, finally you get it. Like the way, in other words, you think that wave is finally going to crash and it's going to like rain down on them? Or do you think we're going to keep building it up until God knows when?
Well,
I mean, what do you think?
One of the biggest things is like, so BAFTA installated those juries to guarantee that they have more diverse nominees. And the reason it hasn't really been working is because every single year they change the rules. And like we saw over the weekend, every single winner was white. So sure, you can force a nomination, but you can never force a win.
Right.
I think like a big problem is that, one, there is still a large chunk of the Academy that is that original voting body that gave Driving Miss Daisy Best Picture. Like, obviously, since the Oscars So White year, they invited way younger people. They've invited more diverse people. They've invited more women, more international people. But it's just like, I think people need to realize it's like, it's going to take so long to change. Like, there are years where we'll get winners that are exciting. Like, we'll get Chloe Zhao, we'll get Jane Campion, we'll get like Moonlight winning Best Picture. We'll get Nomadland winning Best Picture, which I feel like people forget about how cool that is that a movie like Nomadland won Best Picture.
Right.
But that was just such a weird year that like I feel like we all like look past it. But like there are examples of wins where it's like, wow, they are making changes. But it's just like there are also examples of like Ruben Östlund getting a Best Director nomination. But that was simply because like they knew who he was.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
yeah, for sure.
And it was just like, I think like a big problem is like the whole like MGM being behind Till, where they didn't really know what to do. So they just like played the original game that we've all told them, like you campaign, you get her to X, Y, and Z events, and then she'll get nominated because you like did everything you were supposed to. And then you have someone like, I'm not saying she did it, but Andrea Riseborough's team did whatever they did, and then she got a nomination.
Right.
Or you have someone like Ana de Armas who had Netflix behind her. And I think like there's just different types of campaigning. And I think like we need to figure out what it is with director because there's something bad going on here. Like it needs to change. And it's like so frustrating to see winners like Jane Campion, winners like Chloe Zhao, winners like Bong Joon-ho even, like where it's like you get these amazing wins and then it's like it just disappears like
it just deflates
so quickly
you the next year. Yeah, no,
and it's
I
like
agree.
one for them, one for us. But at some point, like you can't just shut out women every year, or like throw us a bone every once in a while. Like
it's wild.
There needs to be some sort of like way to include people who are not well known because it can't just be a popularity contest. Like, it's so frustrating. And it's like the same thing, honestly, like Denis Villeneuve got snubbed. We were all like freaking out about it, but it's like everyone should have the same feelings about like Gina Prince Bythewood missing and like all these other women missing. And it's like, what do we like have to do to get women of color, women behind the camera recognized? It's just so frustrating. And I do think if they added some sort of debut director category, that it would really help because it would help them become names. Because we were talking about this on our Oscar Central podcast where like a big thing with them not broadcasting the short winners live was really hurtful because do you know how many short winners we have watched on that stage? And then they get feature deals. They get big deals after that. And then you see them return later. Like Martin McDonagh won a short Oscar and now he's back nominated for Best Director. Like it really can help platform people. And like, I think we could use a debut director category to highlight new directors and get their name out there. Like we were talking about the DGA debut director category, 4 out of 5 nominees were women. And I think if you had something like that, it would help them build more name recognition. And that could help later on when they have a feature in, or even like you could run into someone double nominated, debut and director, like Charlotte Wells could have been, because if her name was eligible for a debut director, maybe more people would have seeked out the movie and then seeked out like, because I do know like there are a lot of people who are watching After Sun now because Paul Mescal received the actors nomination, but to nominate him, that was only the actors branch. So like maybe the directors branch didn't even watch that movie. But if they were looking at debut directors, it could help there be some overlap. But I do think they need to do something because it's obviously a name recognition thing, but they obviously clearly also have a problem with women. And it's just like there are some women that are in the club, but even then, Greta Gerwig in the club 1 year and then out of the club 2 years later.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, I know it's a hot button topic, but yeah, it's so I mean, basically women directors is my runner up. I got Greta Gerwig in there for Little Women. I was just remember being like floored that one didn't get because it got, like you said, I think it was 6 others. And I was just like, how did this movie get made? It's like Greta Gerwig, you know?
That
and
movie
the fact
was good
that she
because
had
of her.
and she'd previously been nominated. So I don't know. It was just weird that she got left out that year. So she's kind of the representation, but my number 2 overall is just women directors in general. And I agree with everything you said. So we are up to our number 1s, Kenzie. Here we go. The biggest Oscar snub in your mind. What's your number 1?
Mine was actually Greta Gerwig. So
was it?
Yeah, I
for Little Women.
Yes. Her screenplay still stays with me, but Little Women, it's a book I read with my daughter now. I have a children's book version of it for my daughter. I think what she did with that movie was just so powerful, and I don't even know how to. I can't even keep talking about it. But just women.
Well, that's fine. I mean, we covered it for sure. But yeah,
it's.
I mean,
I think she'll obviously be fine. She's a white woman married to a partner with
sure.
a famous male writer director, but it's just one of those. She did everything right. She hit most of the precursors. The movie was Best Picture nominee, was a financial hit, and obviously that wouldn't happen now. But I don't know. I think like there's something to be said about a woman telling that story again in 2019, and it was like it became a classic, and that's not something I ever expected from someone readapting Little Women. Like I would never call her Little Women a remake, and that is so much to do with her direction style. There are so many clips that I'm sure as a man, as a husband, they're like with the father listening from behind the stairs, Beth playing the piano. Like that scene really gets my husband present day. Like I think there's so much to be said about what she did with the two timelines that no one else could have done. And it's just, she's a former nominee in this category. And they were like, never mind. And
it was the definition of a snub. I mean, absolutely.
The directorial choices she made in that movie are what made it the movie it was. And obviously a lot of it had to do with the screenplay, but her direction in that film is just unbelievable, and I'll just never forgive them.
It's gonna be tough. But we match up there. We also matched up with crossover with what my number one is, Mr. Andrew Garfield from The Social Network, not getting in for Best Supporting Actor, hitting pretty much everything leading up to it. Critics loved it. I mean, it was a commercial success. It's David Fincher. Literally no world would I have been like, he's not going to get nominated based on what had been happening that year. And it was my favorite movie of 2010. It's one of my favorite films of that decade. I mean, the guy has another reason why it's somewhat baffling is because that's kind of where it started for him in terms of like notoriety from award circles and critic circles. It really started with that performance. And you mentioned Hacksaw Ridge, but I mean, just other things that he's done since then that
Silence.
Yeah. I mean, Under the Silver Lake, his recent, playing Jim Baker in The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Tick Tick Boom was freaking killer. I mean, the guy is one of those actors that is on that, like, and I'm of course adding X number of years to it, but he's on that path of like a Leo or a Brad Pitt, where it's like everybody wants him in their movie because of the craft and because of how good he is at what he does, but also because he's so charismatic. He's such a recognizable face. Everybody seems to love him, myself included. And I mean, in this movie, The Social Network, I mean, the fuck, I mean, you mentioned the fuck you flip flop. I mean, that scene is like
that scene
all time scene.
It only works with someone like him because someone else could have easily overacted and just ruined it, but he knew exactly how to land that Sorkin dialogue. And I also feel like because Fincher notoriously is not one for being kind to actors with the amount of takes, and I do know that scene was shot like 30 times, so absolutely wild that he was able to pull that off. And if you watch the making of that movie, because RIP to special features on DVDs and Blu-rays, but I mean, the way the camera moves there is so quick, and he knew exactly where to be and to not be in the way of anyone else. And obviously that's a lot to do with Fincher, but like what a perfect pairing of director and actor. And I think like that will just like always really stand out to me. That, and I really love the scene where he goes to the house and sees how they're not working really. And he's like, what are you doing? I think like he just, as someone who's type A, like watching that performance, I was like, I am this man. Like, I have not been cut out of billions of dollars, but I am this man. Like,
and you mentioned too, I mean, he's really the only or one of the very few like relatable characters in that movie too, because
and he really like lands that fine line of being like he's portraying someone real, but also being like an audience surrogate. And I think like that can only be pulled off with an actor like Andrew Garfield.
I mean, I thought it was, when I do my Golden Peas Movie Awards, I lump the supporting and the lead together. I just do male performance and female performance. And I thought that was the best performance by a male that year, period. I just absolutely was taken by it. I'm a bit of a Fincher fanboy, so that may have had something to do with it, but I absolutely love that movie. So there you go.
Ride or die for Fincher.
So there we go. That's our top 5 Oscar snubs. Kenzie, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick promo break. When we come back from that, we're going to give our honorable mentions real quick, and then we'll shout out the fans online and see what they had to say for what their Oscar snubs have been. Kenzie, sit tight. We will be right back. Do you need to do anything, Kenzie, or are you good?
I'm good.
All right. I'm going to grab a beer out of my fridge, which is literally 10 feet away, so I'll be right back.
Awesome.
All right, so just give me like 5 seconds. I'll come back in, and what I like to do, Kenzie, is just have you wrap up your round down, list your 5 again real quick, and then you'll give your honorable mentions. So I'll come back in and we'll do that.
Oh, awesome.
Welcome back, guys. As I said pre-break, Kenzie is here, first-time guest from Oscar Central, and the sting is still fresh with all these Oscar snubs that we've been discussing, especially during Oscar season. It's making me mad all over again. I'm reliving all of these baffling moments in my life.
The PTSD.
But thank you for exactly. But thank you for talking me through it, Kenzie. Why don't you remind everybody, what did you have over there for your top 5 again?
So at number 5, I had Suspiria for hair and makeup. Number 4, Andrew Garfield for supporting actor for The Social Network. Number 3 was Do the Right Thing for Best Picture. Number 2 was Lana Del Rey's Young and Beautiful for Best Original Song. And number 1 was previous Academy Award nominee Greta Gerwig for director for Little Women.
Crazy. So I have something to ask you, but first let me wrap up my top 5. So my number 5 was Bradley Cooper as director for A Star is Born. My number 4 would be Lupita Nyong'o from Us. Number 3 was Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. My number 2 was Greta Gerwig for the director of Little Women. And my number 1 was Andrew Garfield for The Social Network. Now, we had a lot of crossover. You told me you were going to try to.
Yeah.
What happened?
We did.
But it's okay because I feel somewhat redeemed that I was really angry about these. So I'm glad you're on board with a lot of them. So
yeah.
So there you go. All right. So real quick, I know you probably have some honorable mentions that you're equally upset about, but they didn't quite crack your top 5. So what other snubs do you have over there, Kenzie?
So I kind of mentioned her, but Ava DuVernay for Selma, director. I think that movie had so much going against it, and then it worked, and I was blown away with her direction. It's his month. So 2 for Titanic. I'm going to go original screenplay for James Cameron. Fight me all you want, but beautiful storytelling, great structure to it. And Leonardo DiCaprio for Titanic. I'm not a big Leo was overdue. I think it's one of the worst Oscar wins in history, and he was not overdue. But Titanic absolutely deserved nomination. To be nominated for 14 Oscars and not nominate him is insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely
I agree 100%. I mean, easily one of the most memorable
Oscars, and they couldn't bother to nominate him.
Let's go.
Insane.
Yeah.
And then I've rewatched it a few times and in theaters, and I was just like, what are we doing here? And my last one is kind of 2 because they're both France. Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Titan not even making any list because one was not submitted.
Celine Sciamma too, another female director.
And Julia Ducournau for Titan. It's 2 of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, and to just not even get an international feature nomination. And I'm sorry that people will yell at me that Les Mis was better than Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It was not.
Yeah, right. It
was
definitely
not.
was not. Without a
Um,
doubt, it was not. No
but
offense to anyone that agrees or thinks otherwise, but I'm with
yeah,
you on that one.
but yeah, those two just
All right.
keep me up at night. What
Well,
about
that's
you?
good.
What are some of your
So yeah,
honorable
so
mentions?
my honorables I'll run through real quick. We touched on really just one of them, which is kind of surprising. But my number 6 now, this was in the conversation. I remember that for that year. I don't have the stats in front of me or whatever, but really this dude, period. I feel like ever since he kind of transitioned from comedy to like drama, if you will, could have easily been nominated like 2 or 3 times by now. But I'm talking about Jim Carrey, and I'm talking about from Man on the Moon would be my number
That's a
6, where he
good one.
portrayed Andy Kaufman.
That's a
But I mean,
really
you're
good
talking
one.
Eternal Sunshine, The Truman Show. I mean, what he did in The Truman Show could have been nominated. I think the guy is gonna always be running away from the Ace Ventura days and kind of that slapstick comedy that he did, which I also love, by the way. But I don't know, just when he became Andy Kaufman, and there's a really good documentary on Netflix about his kind of transformation to that role too. But that would be my number 6. My number 7 would be the other kind of like horror girl, if you will, and that's Toni Collette from Hereditary, playing this just fucking out of this world,
Unwell woman.
just unbridled mother on the verge of God knows what. But yeah, I love Ari Aster. I love Hereditary, and I felt like that was one that could have been nominated as well, and it would have made sense from a horror perspective. Number 8 would have been Amy Adams from her Arrival. I love her. I love her body of work. I'm not like, I mean, I probably give the movie like a B minus or a C plus. Like, I mean, I liked it, but I just think her performance was just so like quietly brilliant, and she was getting nominated everywhere else, and it just didn't happen for her that year. My number 9 would be from this year. The best female performance, aside from Mia Goth, in my opinion, was Danielle Deadwyler
I
until
think that if you redid this in 5 years, that would be every person you
yeah,
asked number one,
yeah,
because
soul crushing.
it's also one of those things, like, you don't even need to watch the movie if you think you can't handle it. Like, you can watch that clip that's resurfaced of
Yeah,
her testimony, and
yeah.
how you do not nominate that woman is unbelievable.
Oh my god, it's so I just can't. I literally can't
It's
believe it. I
honestly
mean,
laughable. It's just saying I don't like black actresses in all caps. Like,
that's what it
that's,
feels like. Yeah.
yeah,
If people talk about Andrea Riseborough, I did a video on my YouTube channel about that, and I kind of researched it when it happened because I was like everybody else, just really shocked by it. Not to take away from her performance, I thought it was good in To Leslie, but I mean, you look
it's
at
not
like
on that
Michelle
level.
Williams. No, it's not. But you look at like Michelle Williams and The Fablemans. I mean, that's a supporting, in my opinion. You look
It's
at
supporting, and it's also not good.
it's not that great. And you look at Ana de Armas, who I mean, that
Bad
movie is a
movie, and I
fucking
don't even
shit
think she's
show.
good in it. I don't even think
I
she's
mean,
good in it.
I love her so
It's
much, but that movie is a nightmare. Like,
well,
I
now
can't believe
I
that they're
can't
even.
even defend her anymore because of everything she said post that movie. But yeah,
Yeah,
Danielle Deadwyler will just go down. This will
it's crazy.
always be one of the biggest snubs. Like, when you Google Oscar snubs, I'm pretty sure in a few years she'll be the first result,
Mhm.
because
One of the
an
all-time
all-timer.
bonehead,
Yeah.
miss. And then my number 10 would have been. I don't know. Maybe Kenzie, but I think this is the movie that made them kind of start doing the 10 nominees. But it didn't get nominated for best movie that year, and it was The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan's The
Yeah,
Dark Knight in
so a
2008.
lot of people
Yeah,
consider that the one that pushed them
that's
over
just
the
like
edge.
I'm like, I mean, even if you don't like quote unquote superhero movies, I mean, that was a
But
crime
that
drama
is
that
like, because
was
I'm not a
epic.
superhero girly, but that really started the whole, you can make a superhero movie that's in realism,
Hmm.
and it doesn't have to be reliant on like CGI. It
Right.
can be practical, it can be so many
Performance
other
based.
things.
Hmm.
And I think like that's really like the blueprint for like what you get now when you get a director like Matt Reeves, who made the Batman last
Hmm.
year. Like, you can tell that he was like, if Christopher Nolan can do that, I can do this.
Exactly.
And I think like those are the movies that get people like me, who don't like superhero stuff, to
Hmm.
watch them. Like,
Yeah.
if you give me a movie that's inspired by Zodiac and Seven, I will be there.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
it is definitely the movie that kind of kickstarted the expand to 10, include more populace, because that's like the perfect example of, for me, someone who is not high on Top Gun Maverick, of the in-between of like populace and well crafted movies.
And you need those too. I mean, you know, like when Black Panther got nominated. I mean, you need
yeah,
those.
because like Black Panther's like I think Black Panther is more commercial, but like the technical aspects of Black Panther, like, you're undeniable. Like the costume design, the score, even like at the first one, like even the cinematography, like it was, you could feel the craftsmanship of that movie. And I think like that's what sets those movies apart. And like that's what made the movie, I think it won 3. Like, it's like, that's what happens, is like you let people like Ryan Coogler make movies.
Right.
And that's what you get, is like
exactly
a beautiful film. And I think like the Dark Knight is kind of like the Kickstarter to some of like, it doesn't have to be whatever Ant-Man is. I will kick Ant-Man for the rest of my life, because that trailer is the worst thing that ever happened to me.
I mean, I have MCU fatigue without a doubt. But what the Dark Knight was different because it was like a crime drama with Batman in it, as opposed to
a Batman movie.
Right. So it was, and you're right. Christopher Nolan is a filmmaker and he's a storyteller. So he's like, sure, I'll make this Batman trilogy for you, but guess what? They're going to be Nolan movies. They're not going to be Batman movies.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's kind of what we got. I mean, Heath Ledger gave an all-time performance, and he won posthumously that year. And the technical stuff that it was, in the running for, I just feel like I just couldn't. I don't know. I just feel like they missed an opportunity to really, give it its due with at least a Best Picture nomination. Much like horror. I mean, I'm not a big superhero guy either, but I mean, much like horror, that genre doesn't really get noticed a lot by the Academy. So,
well, it shouldn't.
Nevertheless, it doesn't. But you're right. Okay, so there we go. So there you go, guys. I tell you what, we're going to head over to social media, Kenzie. We're going to see what the fans have to say real quick as we wrap up the episode. So I just said over there, what are some of the biggest Oscar snubs of all time? Let's see what they had to say. Dan, patron and friend of the show, says Jake Gyllenhaal from Nightcrawler. He shares a gif of him from that film. Tony, patron and friend of the show, says Hitchcock or Kubrick, never winning Best Director.
Yeah, those were on my, because I almost named my dog Stanley Kubrick. Changed my life, but him not winning for A Space Odyssey is wild. Barry Lyndon, nothing, absolutely insane. Yeah. And obviously Alfred Hitchcock, but I would have given it to him for Psycho, and Billy Wilder won for The Apartment, and I don't know if I could take away.
I know that. Yeah, that's a tough call.
Yeah,
it's a tough call. Jared Taylor, patron friend of the show, says, Won't You Be My Neighbor for Best Documentary.
That I agree with, but I also think that has like a bit of a legacy now, that it's like one of those infamous populist documentaries that missed out. Mm-hmm. And it gave us like the boom and resurgence of Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, yeah, for sure. Jared also mentioned Tron Legacy for Best Visual Effects, and the score for Daft Punk as well.
Those are 2 great ones. Completely agree.
I agree. Joey Austin, patron and friend of the show, says he wished The Wrestler had got nominated for Best Picture.
I'm an Aronofsky girly. I would say yes.
Yeah. Mickey Rourke got all the kind of fanfare that year. Deserve it. I thought it was a great performance. Let's see. Chris Yaney, patron and friend of the show, he'll say 13 Days, The Perfection, and RRR not getting in for Best Picture this year. Do you think that should have been one of the 10 this year?
I don't, but I would have considered him in director, honestly, Rajamoli. Yeah. I just don't think I would have put it in picture, especially because I know it would take Women Talking spot. So I am fine with its miss.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, actually. Julio, patron in front of the show. Now, we were just talking about superhero movies. He's a big superhero guy. So he says that he feels like Endgame should have been nominated.
Avengers Not Endgame. To quote a white man, but Don Draper, that's what the money's for.
Oh, man. Let's see. Jason, patron friend of my friend of the show, says Do the Right Thing. There you go for Best Picture. He also says Jim Carrey for
unbelievable.
The Truman Show. So that's for me, I think. And then he's got Jake Gyllenhaal. He lists Nightcrawler, Nocturnal Animals, Enemy, Brokeback Mountain. I mean,
He
the
was
guy's got a
nominated
resume.
for Brokeback Mountain.
He was, yeah.
He lost. But I agree about Nocturnal Animals. I think he's incredible in that movie.
Yeah, he's really good. Like you said, though, after Nightcrawler, it kind of
He
a different
fell off the
turn.
face of the earth.
Yeah. Michael Hill, a friend of mine and a patron of the show, says that we don't talk about Bruno for best song.
I agree. I think that's what we were kind of talking about earlier with original song that broke the zeitgeist. It was everywhere. Everybody knew it. I didn't even see that movie for months, and I knew the song. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they performed it at the Oscars. It was nominated.
And we will end on Dan Roski, top tier patron of the show, a promising young loyal. He says Pam Grier from Jackie Brown, Edward Norton in Primal Fear. That's a good one. That's a pretty big snub, I feel like. I've forgotten about that one. He also says Courtney Love from The People versus Larry Flint, Steve Buscemi in Fargo, and Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. What do you think about that list there?
Pam Grier is an all-timer in my household. Jackie Brown is me and my husband's favorite Quentin Tarantino film. Nice. She's beautiful. Everything you want in a lead actress in that film. Everything.
I agree. And guys, thank you so much for the feedback this week in the old suggestion box. As always, I appreciate it. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your comments, but we're running a little long because this has been a blast talking to Kenzie. Finally getting her on the show from Oscar Central during Oscar season to talk about Oscar snubs. So what else could I want? I'm excited that you're here finally. Why don't you tell everyone real quick, Kenzie, where they can find you and everybody over at Oscar Central?
You can follow Oscar Central on all social media platforms at Oscars_Central. You can follow me at Vanunu on all social media platforms. And check out our website, OscarCentral.com. We have predictions, reviews. We have an amazing Oscar board with everyone's predictions ranked. We have lots of FYCs for everyone to check out. And this drops right before the Oscars. So there will be tons of think pieces on who is winning what in every single category. So if you're in the Academy, I hope you voted for Austin Butler, Paul Mescal, and that's my stump speech.
Oh, man. Yep. Kenzie, it was a blast. I really appreciate you being here. It was a lot of fun. And thanks so much for making the trek over here and making the time to do it.
Awesome. I was so excited to be asked, and I can't wait to come back one day.
Absolutely. By the way, I'm waiting until after the SAGs to make my final predictions.
So. Good call. Good call.
I need to do that because I don't know what the hell's going on in some of these races. So I'm going to hang tight. But anyway, guys, look in the show notes and look Kenzie up and check out Oscar Central. Make sure you give her a follow over there. She's a blast. And as we all know, Nicole Ackman is as well. And she's part of that click over there as well.
She does everything with me. And I'm so thankful to run everything with her. So go North Carolina for giving me Nicole.
Yes. Kenzie, it was a blast. I appreciate it. And once again, thanks so much for being here. Guys, thank you so much for listening this week. We will be back next week, post-Oscars. So I don't know how I'll feel, but I'll be back and I'll have another guest and another top 5 for you. Until then, everybody take care. All right, Kenzie, just hang tight. I'm going to end the broadcast, but it needs your file needs to upload. So
awesome.
sometimes